What's up, my wizards? It's Dev. From Mtg, we like magic, and I got a spicy competitive brew for you today. It's been a while since we did a competitive brew. It's been mostly budget stuff lately. So today, we're going to do 4-color Uncage the Menagerie. And I know that Uncage doesn't exactly scream competitive, but hear me out. Now, I've always felt that Uncage is sort of a really under-discussed card in this meta. Right now, I actually think it's really good, but it is a little obscure because it really doesn't see much play. And I wouldn't be surprised if you've never seen it or if you at least need a refresher course on it, you know. Basically, the way this works is if you pump 4 mana into it, let's say, X equals 2, you go get 2-drop creatures. From your deck, you put them in your hand. Same thing goes if you put 5 mana into it. X equals 3, you go get 3-drop guys, put 9 mana worth of value into your hand for your 5 mana. And yeah, you can even go get 4-drop dudes for 6 mana. That's 16 mana worth of value you just tutored up into your hand for your 6 mana investment you've essentially gassed up for the rest of the game. And that's why I think Uncage is so good right now. It's essentially card advantage combined with tutoring, and it always gets you some card advantage. You know, you put 4 mana into it, you're generating 1 card worth of card advantage. And if you put 6 mana into it, you net 3 cards, and you're tutoring, you get cards that you want. You know, that's really insane right now in a lot of different matchups. If this card resolves against control, that's game in a lot of situations, and it's really good in the mirror match. And you may have tilted your head just then when I said mirror match, but yes, I mean mirror match, because the keen-eyed observer will note as we go through this deck that this is kind of essentially a hot take on 4-color energy. We're playing a lot of the same cards, but we're taking out some glory bringers and some other stuff on the curve so that we can fit Uncage and sort of warp our deck building philosophy around it a little bit when it comes to the 3 and 4 drops. Now, against other energy decks, Uncage will pretty much always resolve, especially game 1, before they get their negates in, and they usually don't use their negates to counter Uncage anyway. But if the card resolves, it's insane card advantage in the mid-game. A kind of refill on turn 5, or just in the late game even, is fantastic in the mirror match to break stalemates. Now, the reason we're choosing to do that is because Uncage basically calls for us to play the best creatures on the curve at 2, 3, and 4 that we can find, and 4-color energy is a deck that already essentially does that, so Uncage slots in really easily. But the most important part of the Uncage deck is definitely the creatures that we decide to build around it. So let me take you through the 2s, the 3s, and the 4 drops here, sort of all together, starting with the 2s. We're going to play 3 copies of Longtusk Cub, 3 copies of Glintsleeve Siphoner, and 4 copies of Servant of the Conduit. Now, a 4 of Servant is in there for lots of reasons. We need to make 4 different colors of mana in the deck, and Servant helps with that. But even if you've got all your mana sorted out, sometimes you'll do a 4-mana Uncage for a Servant so that you can get some energy. You know, it's 2 energy when it comes into play, which is a pretty decent deal. It can also obviously help us get to a big Uncage the Menagerie a turn earlier, which is really relevant too. So I'm going to play all 4 copies of Servant, no questions asked. But as far as Longtusk and Glintsleeve, I think 3 copies of Glintsleeve we're pretty comfortable with here. I was tempted to put the 4th in the sideboard, but I just don't know that we need the 4th, especially considering this deck generates card advantage really well already because of Uncage. But Glintsleeve is still obviously a really important card in the meta right now that can draw us a bunch of cards over the course of a game and is a great way to spend our energy. Now, as far as Longtusk Cub goes, we are shaving a copy off of what every other energy deck in the format plays. You know, it seems like blasphemy not to play 4 copies of Longtusk Cub, but we do have to make certain concessions in order to make Uncage as consistent as possible. You know, we want to be able to go get 4 drops as easily as possible, and we want to be able to go get 3 drops as easily as possible. I think that means we have to make some concessions with our 2 drops, so if you want to go down to 2 copies of Glintsleeve and go up to 4 copies of Cub, I wouldn't begrudge that, but considering we can so easily search up a Longtusk Cub when we need it, I think 3 copies is fine. And by the way, Longtusk is another great way to use your energy in the late game. You can just tutor up a Longtusk Cub, play it, and use all your energy on it to just make it like an 8/8. It happens. Now, as far as our 3-drop creatures go, we're playing 2 that are really familiar to energy decks, but we're playing a 3rd that is not usually seen in energy decks. So here we go. We're playing 4 copies of Rogue Refiner, 3 copies of Whirler Virtuoso, and 2 copies of Champion of Wits. Now, as far as Refiner and Virtuoso go, I think that you could switch these 3s and 4s if you wanted to, you know. I just feel more comfortable shaving a copy of Virtuoso than I do shaving a copy of Refiner. But I do think we need to play a 3 of one of them just to make room for Champion of Wits and make sure we can get Uncage off for X equals 3 as much as possible and get all the value that we can out of that play again, as much as possible. So I think that we have to make some room for Champion, or Pia Nalar for that matter, if you wanted to do that. That'd be a way of searching up 2 Whirler Virtuosos without actually searching up 2 Whirler Virtuosos, so keep that in mind. But I like Champion of Wits so that we can draw into an Uncage Menagerie more easily, if we don't already have it in our hand. So, and the deck needs a little bit more card advantage, I feel like, than it usually has. So I just like Champion, period, and it's a really good late game Eternalized play too. So really big fan of Champion of Wits. I like that it's in the deck, and it usually doesn't appear in Energy, but I think it has a place here. But as far as Whirler and Rogue Refiner, again, you could switch these 3s and 4s if you really wanted to, because Virtuoso is obviously a very powerful card. But just like Long Tusk Cub, we can easily search it up in the mid to late game if we really want a copy of it, and when we play it, especially if we end up playing it late, we can just make 3 or sometimes even 4 Thopters like right then and there. Now onto our 4-drops, we have to play at least 4 4-drops so that we can make sure to get enough value out of Uncage the Menagerie. Now, the thing about our 4-drops is even though we're making room for 4 of them, we don't necessarily have to go get 4 4-drops every time X equals 4 on Uncage the Menagerie. It's up to X creatures, and if we just go get 3 4-drop creatures, we're still getting 2 cards worth of card advantage, and we're getting 12 mana worth of value for our 6 mana. So I still think it's okay to go X equals 4 and only tutor up 3 creatures, but we're trying to get 4 as often as possible. So with that in mind, here's 2 of these 4-drops. I'll show you the other 2 in a second. We're going to play 2 copies of Bristling Hydra and 2 copies of Hostage Taker. Well, Hydra is just a staple in energy decks. It's good against literally everything. You know, you get it down early against aggro, which can be done on turn 3 with a Servant of the Conduit. Then it's a really good way to swing the game into your favor. You know, it's going to be tough for them to deal with a Bristling Hydra, but it's tough for anything to deal with a Bristling Hydra. So we got to play at least a couple of copies of that. It's Control's worst nightmare when we resolve it, which again, we can do on turn 3 pretty easily and get it up under things like Disallow and such. So it's just Hydra's a great play in almost any game. Same can be said of Hostage Taker, even against control decks. You know, they play Torrential Gearhulk, they play the Scare of God. You know, there's going to be times where Hostage Taker is fine against those decks too, but it's great against aggro, and it's even great against mid-range and stuff. Again, in the mirror, Hostage Taker is great, but we're going to play one of a couple of other 4-drops here. We're going to play 1 copy of Vizier of Many Faces and 1 copy of Gonti, Lord of Luxury. Now, both of these have been making appearances in sideboards as of late, so we're just going to go ahead and slot them into the main deck here because Uncage calls for us to play a couple of more 4-drops, again, so we can maximize the value of it whenever possible. So these are already good cards in sideboards. Gonti, decent against mid-range and fantastic in the control matchup, and obviously Vizier of Many Faces is stout in this deck. It's already good out of the sideboard against energy decks. We see that a lot in this format, but it's fantastic in this deck where you can go get Hostage Taker, Bristling Hydra, and Vizier of Many Faces. And then, you know, you go Hostage Taker one turn, next turn you drop Vizier, copying Hostage Taker and get another one of their creatures. That's crazy. Or you can just make a second Bristling Hydra or whatever you want to do. So just Vizier of Many Faces is even better than it usually is in this deck. We can use it to copy a Whirler Virtuoso or, you know, again, a Bristling Hydra or Hostage Taker. It's just unbelievable, the range of options that we have with Vizier in this deck. And to finish off the creatures, we're going to slot in just 1 copy of the Scarab God because we sort of have to, you know. There's a reason that 4-color energy exists, and 9/10 of that reason is the Scarab God. It's mostly, actually, like 9.8 of that reason is the Scarab God. The amount of long game value that the card gives you is just unbelievable. We all know that by now. And every creature in the deck works super stupid well with the Scarab God, you know. You bring back a Whirler Virtuoso, look at that. You have a 4/4 that can make Thopters. You know, you bring back a Rogue Refiner, you draw 2, you get 2 energy, and you draw 1, you get 2 energy, and you have a 4/4. That's crazy. You know, Vizier of Many Faces, that's good to bring back. There's a Hostage Taker, 4/4 that steals one of their guys. Just like, again, every single creature in the deck is insane to bring back. With the Scarab God, the Scries are good sometimes. Just everything about the card is unbelievable, and it keeps coming if they can't exile it. So, yeah, there's a reason why it's maybe the most expensive card in the entire format. We'll play at least the 1. I also want to add, by the way, one more time that Uncage says up to that many cards. So if you really, really wanted to, if you had to, as a matter of fact, in the late game, you could spend 7 mana on an Uncage and just go get your 1 copy of the Scarab God if you really need it. Now that leaves room for a few spells in this deck, and we have to basically play these spells. You know, we have to play 4 copies of Attune with Ether, and I think we have to play at least 3 copies of Harness Lightning. Hardest Lightning is removal. You know, we can't play the entire game hoping to never really interact with our opponent. Yeah, we have Hostage Taker and a couple of other things, but we need cheap early interaction sometimes, and this is very, very effective at taking out stuff that's way above it. You know, we can spend 2 mana to take out a 4 or 5 or even 6 mana guy sometimes, depending on our energy. So, Hardest Lightning is almost always a very, very good trade. It's instant speed, and we have to play some removal, so it's in. As far as Attune with Ether goes, it's just 1 mana to fix our mana for almost the rest of the game. You'd be surprised how far 1 land can go, and 2 energy is crazy for making more Thopters with a Virtuoso, or whatever, you know, making more mana with an Ether Hub. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with 2 energy for just 1 mana. It's a great way to start the game. You know, just everything about Attune with Ether is crazy. It lets us play fewer lands and still fix our mana. We're gonna play it. Now here's your mana base right here. One thing you may notice, again, keen-eyed spikes, is that this has 1 more land than 4-color and Temur energy decks usually have. Usually they run 22. I'm running 23 here just because we're trying to get to a 5 or even 6 drop Uncage the Menagerie sometimes, so I think it is important to run that extra land. As a matter of fact, we're also running Scarab God, so that's just like a bunch of 5 drops if you want to look at it that way, or like a bunch of 6 drops and a 5 drop. So I think it's important to at least play the 1 land, or the 1 extra land. So other than that, the list looks pretty, you know, familiar if you know anything about 3 and 4 color energy decks at this point, you know. But I am playing a few more of these bicycle lands than you normally see. I think it's important to have lands that draw us card if we draw them dead late. And here's your sideboard right here. In some ways, we're just sideboarding into Temur or 4-color energy some of the time. You know, you see the Glory Bringers in there. We can bring those in for Uncage the Menagerie. Sometimes we'll do that against aggro. As a matter of fact, against aggro, that's when we'll start to resemble 4-color energy the most. Uncage will come out, although not all 4 copies. Just take out 3 copies of Uncage. But you can put in the Vraska's Contempt against their Hazarets. You can put in the Fatal Push if need be, and it usually needs be. And Glory Bringer can come in as a top-end finisher that also works as removal against aggro decks. So we're covering some bases in that matchup because I feel like we have to more than usual in an energy deck that usually has a great matchup against Ramanapparat. But against Control, we don't have the best matchup, and that's where most of our concessions come in. You know, Duress is in there, which could also be Kitesail Freebooter because we're an Uncaged deck. But I just think that Duress is just a better card in most situations, and they can't ever get their card back, so that's important too. Negate is in there against sweepers and such that you know, obviously Control is going to play, and just anything non-creature. That's most of what Control is going to do. And then Bristling Hydra is also a great card in that Control matchup if you can resolve it. And here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 67, a really high score indeed. And if I was going to score like Temur Energy or 4-color energy, it would probably score around the same, you know? But again, I think that one of the big appeals to this deck is that it performs really well in the mirror match, you know, again, against other 4-color energy decks. The ability to get an almost guaranteed resolve, you know, on a card that gets you 2 or 3 cards worth of card advantage, and again, just gasses you up for like the rest of the whole game, is an unfreaking believable play that'll help you outpace other energy decks. But the problem is that because of mostly the mana base and the Scarab God and a couple of other things like Hostage Taker, the deck has the same price tag as your average 3 or 4 color energy deck. It's like $250. Now, a lot of 3 and 4 color energy decks are like $3 and $325 right now because they play multiple copies of the Scarab God. They play a couple of copies of Chandra, which is something we didn't do in this deck. I don't necessarily feel like we have the red to do it. There's only the 2 copies of Glory Bringer in the sideboard that cost 2 red mana. I don't think we can rely on it that much in this deck because we've added the black. So I don't know how much I want to rely on Chandra, but because we're not playing her or a second copy of the Scarab God, we do come down on the budget a little bit from other 3 and 4 color energy decks. So there is that, but still $250 is a price to pay. But try this one out. If you can, give it a shot. It's actually, again, just fabulous in the mirror match like you wouldn't expect it to be. But I'll say it one more time. A refill in the mid to late game in the mirror match is just freaking unbelievable. It has to be experienced. So I hope you do give it a try, and if you want to look at the list all in one place, you can click on the very first link down there in that description box right there. That'll take you over to TCG Player. They help me sponsor the content, keep the lights on and such, so make sure you go over to them. Just clicking on the link helps the channel out. So do that. You can hit like if you want to, if you enjoyed it. I hope you did. I know there's going to be a certain contingent of people that are like, this is just energy, but again, I think this is how we make energy fun. Uncage is just a hilarious card to cast, no matter when in the game you cast it. So don't just discount it as an energy deck. This is a really, really fun list to play. So again, hope you like it. Hope you hit like. Hope you subscribe if you're new or if you just haven't done it yet. Hit the bell for the notifications. You can follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. And there's other stuff you can do. You throw me $1 on Patreon and you can see what decks are coming up the day before I do them. And you can still help me vote on the next few decks we're going to do to sort of round out Ixalan standards. So get in there, pledge your buck on patreon.com/SBMTG. And I will have these Rivals of Ixalan spoilers for you super, super soon. By the way, there's a couple that just came out this morning. I'll try and have those for you in the next day. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications because you're going to want that stuff. But in any case, I'm pretty sure that's all the spiel I have to spiel to you. And I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from SBMTG. I messed it up at the very end. I was right there. But anyway, I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards.